Welcome. This video will talk about the climate change story cards tool. This tool is used to make farmer groups aware of the change in climate in their own environments. There are 8 story cards to this tool and 2 scenarios. Let's look at the first scenario. First, we see a lot of people farming. For many generations, their people farmed on the same land using traditional practices. But in recent years, the dry seasons were long with strong winds. The rain season had become very short. When the rains did come, they were so heavy that they caused landslides and floods. The rains then stopped too early before crops could mature. Their traditional practices did not seem to be as effective under the new climate conditions. In the second picture, we see some of the people cutting down trees. They were clearing land for the next season. They cut down all the trees and used fire to open land. Others might have warned them about the dangers of the practice, but they did not listen. They insisted their predecessors had used the same practices to become great farmers. They continued opening land and raised a granary to store the huge harvest they expected at the end of the season. In the third picture, we see the same farmers planting the seeds. As soon as the rain started, they planted the same maize variety they had used for the past 5 seasons. Others recommended planting seeds of early maturing varieties and rotating crops to make the soil fertile again, but these farmers did not listen. Their methods worked before. Why would they not work now? The fourth picture shows the same farmers, but they do not look very happy. As the rains intensified, the garden flooded. After the rain stopped much too early, there was a long dry spell, which left a majority of their crops damaged and immature before harvest. With a very small harvest, the farmers have nothing to store in their granary. Let's move on to the second scenario. In the first card of the second scenario, we see some other farmers on another field. They realized that climate change was affecting their community. While opening land, they did not use fire, but instead they cut the weeds and shrubs and mixed them in the soil to keep their nutrients. They preserved the trees around their gardens and planted more to protect their crops from strong winds during the dry season and conserve the soil. The second card shows them working hard. It seems like they are digging trenches after opening land. Some of the neighbors laughed at them and said it was a waste of time. But the farmers remembered the benefits of digging trenches. They could retain water for future crop use and prevent soil erosion. They dug enough trenches in their garden, and everyone was eager to see how they could protect the crops from the floods and erosion. In the third card, the farmers bought and planted seeds of improved early maturing varieties instead of the seeds they had used for the previous 5 years. They used the recommended spacing and contours. When the rains intensified, the soil in their garden did not erode because they had prepared properly. When the rains stopped early, the crops could still use the water that was retained in the soil. Their crops were very healthy. Lastly, the farmers' crops were healthy at harvest time because of early maturing variety they had planted. The trees planted around the garden protected the crops from strong winds that would have damaged them after the rains. They ended up with a very good harvest that ensured they had enough food to take the family through the following season. They sold off some of the crops and were able to meet costs of their basic needs at home. Having gone over the 8 story cards and 2 scenarios, it is important to guide farmer groups in a correct understanding of the tool by asking some challenging questions. What do you see happening in the pictures? Are these things happening in your community? How has the weather changed in your community over the last 10 years? What did you learn from the stories? Do you have a preference of which scenario do you think did a better job? Why?